Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the afternoon of day 2 of PSX. I just want to be on stage to tell you how important this next panel is to our community, to our business, to our life, to what we do as PlayStation gamers. We're very honored here today to have a panel of accessibility experts to talk to us about how do we continue to make games more available, more accessible to gamers in every walk of life. As you've seen today, spending the 2 days with us here in the community, we are a diverse bunch, the PlayStation Nation. We come from many different places. We have many different skills and abilities, but we're all coming together with our love for PlayStation, our love for gaming. The panel here today are going to talk about some of the initiatives that they have underway, that they're working on in order to continue to make gaming as inclusive as possible. The ideal is every gamer should be able to have all the different gaming experiences that we can possibly bring to them, and that's why this is such an important thing for us. It's important for PlayStation. It's important for all of us here. We really want to be leaders in this field, and thank you all for coming today. It's going to be super interesting. Again, we have the honor of an esteemed panel to talk on this subject, so without further ado, I give you Ian Hamilton and the accessibility panel.
Well, hello. So my name is Ian. I'm an accessibility specialist, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. And also with me on stage, I have Mark and Tara and Josh and Alex. We're going to get to the proper introductions in a little bit, but first off, I'm going to give you a little explanation about what it is that we're going to talk about today. So accessibility. But first of all, to explain about what accessibility is, I'm first going to talk a little bit about what disability itself actually is. And for that, I've got this guy here to help me. So this photo was taken from an investigation that was done for a newspaper in the UK. And I'm sure from looking at this picture, many of the people watching would be able to have some kind of a guess at what it is that's making this guy disabled. So you might be thinking, perhaps, that he has cerebral palsy. In which case, you would be correct in that he has cerebral palsy. However, cerebral palsy is not actually a disability. It's a medical condition, and that's a really important distinction to make. So what else could it be, then? So again, you might be thinking that he's in a wheelchair. And of course, he is in a wheelchair, but a wheelchair also is not a disability. It's a piece of assistive technology, like a pair of glasses. It's actually what's helping him go about his plan for the day. The thing that's getting in the way of his plan for the day is when he went to meet his friends in this restaurant and he encountered the steps. And that's what disability actually is. It's a mismatch between a person and their surroundings. When someone's impairment comes up against some kind of a barrier, resulting in difficulty performing a day-to-day task. And these barriers, whether it is a flight of stairs or a shelf that's too high, or red and green teams in a deathmatch, or a fixed control scheme, these kind of barriers are often put there by someone else. You know, they're often designed. There's also the flip side to that. No, we can never really remove all barriers and include people with disability. But by being aware of the kinds of barriers that people can face, we can actually figure out which barriers are unnecessary and avoidable and remove them and prevent disabling situations like this from occurring. And it's straightforward to do as well. I mean, it's particularly in game development. Almost every barrier that people encounter in games can be addressed by one of two techniques. Either by communicating information in more than one way. So, for example, subtitles as well as speech, or using a symbol as well as a color. And the other method is just offering a bit of flexibility in the way people experience a game. So offering some options, some choice. So, for example, a choice of difficulty levels, a choice of controller setups. And it's important stuff as well. It's important for all kinds of reasons, which we're going to hear some of in a little bit. But in particular, it's important because people with disabilities are a market, a big market. So, I mean, the official government statistics in the USA is somewhere around 18% of the population. And that's only what falls under traditional definitions as well. It doesn't include color blindness, which affects 8% of males. Difficulty reading, which affects 14% of adults. So whichever way you look at it, it's big, big numbers of people. Now, this is big numbers that developers aren't going to want to miss out on the business from. Also numbers that developers aren't going to want to have missing out on experiencing their vision. And it's also important for the human reason, for the benefit that games can bring, the access to socializing, to recreation, to culture. So because it's so important, it's been really, really nice to see in the past few years in particular, things progressing, the industry advancing. And there's been a lot of good people who've been working very hard to bring this progress about, which brings me nicely onto our panel. So I'm going to ask the panel if you can introduce yourselves. So if we start with Alex and work your way back. So if you just tell us who you are, where you're from, and also if you could tell the audience as well why accessibility matters to you personally.
Sure. So hi, I'm Alexandria Neonike. I'm a UI designer at Naughty Dog. And during the production of Uncharted 4, Josh Straub here reached out to me, just emailed me, and to ask if we could talk about accessibility in games. And admittedly, in the 9 years that I'd worked in games, it wasn't a thing that I had put a lot of thought into. I didn't know much about it. And so then once he reached out to me and I started speaking to him, just in those like few conversations, to see how difficult something that seemed so simple to me was for some people. It could prevent them entirely from playing a game. As a person who works on games, I was like, okay, well, you know, as a developer, you want everybody to be able to enjoy your game, so that kind of became a big part of the motivator for me to continue to work on games, just to make sure that everybody could play them, or as many people as possible could get to enjoy them. So, yeah.
Hey, Josh.
So I'm Josh Straub. I'm the editor-in-chief of Daggers. We're a website that provides journalistic reviews and previews in regards to physical accessibility. And I created the company because living with a disability stinks. I don't know if any of you know that, but living with a disability is really a subpar standard of living. So, but the only way a lot of people can get an escape from that is through video games. I mean, even if you're not disabled, you still get a modicum of escapism from your disability. And I set out to create a company that took a journalistic spin on the issue and focused on educating the consumer. And from that, I've grown a bit of a consulting practice where I come alongside developers and help them know how to make their games more accessible. So that's me in a nutshell.
Hello, I'm Tara. I'm a project manager at Gaikai, the makers of PlayStation now available with a PC client for you to download. Sorry. So I got into game accessibility after a teacher of mine from college introduced me to it. And it, for me, was something that I very much related to. As a child, I was in a pretty severe car accident, and I got a taste of what it was like to not be able to play games all the time. But for me, I got better. I have everything now, but for some people that's not the case. And coming from a military family, like I've seen my cousin come from home and have injuries, and like that's just a part of life. Not all of us are always going to be able to play games in their current state. And beyond being a game developer, as a gamer, I love games. Games are a huge part of my life, and I want everyone to be able to play games and enjoy them as much as I do. So anything I could do to educate people, to tell other developers what they could do, to give them resources, like I wanted to do that because I want to play games. I mean, it's almost selfish. Like as I age, I want to be able to still be able to play games, and accessibility is a way I know I can game for forever.
So hi everybody, my name is Mark Barley. I'm the founder and executive director of the Able Gamers charity. So game accessibility is really important to me because while I'm a service-disabled veteran, my disability never affected the way I played, but my military career brought some really amazing friends together, and my best friend actually married my bunkmate from the military. We used to use video games, and every Friday night, I'm going to age myself a little bit, we used to log on and play EverQuest. Sorry. And one Friday, I got on Ventrilo. I actually don't remember what we used back then, sticks and cups. And my friend didn't log on, and so I waited a few minutes, and then I picked up the phone and I called her. And in 2001, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And in 2004, that night, MS decided that her mousing hand wasn't going to work, and that she refused to play because this was important to her. And she was crying because she loved EverQuest, and she loved her character. So that night, instead of spending time playing, I spent time looking for stuff to help her. We were Yahooing, because Google hadn't been invented yet, and we didn't really find anything. So we kind of took that as a calling that maybe this is something that we should do. So we founded this little website so that other people with disabilities could kind of join and share their stories, and it just kind of blossomed to us being on this stage right now.
Yes, I mean, you can see there's all kinds of reasons why it's important, and as I was mentioning, it's being recognized. There's progress being made. Particularly in the last couple of years, there's been all kinds of nice stuff from platforms, individual developers, industry bodies. So just wondering if you could share this, if there's been anything in particular that's stuck out for you in the past couple of years. So Tara, do you want to kick off?
So it's been really exciting to watch accessibility in the past couple of years in particular. We've seen huge gains in particularly like both the PlayStation and the Xbox One launched accessibility features at a system level, which if you had asked me, you know, even 3-4 years ago if that would ever happen, like, I don't know that I would have said yes.
I wouldn't have.
Yeah, I mean, so seeing that come along and then was amazing. And then even from that, we're having discussions. We're here. And I was super excited. Of course, titles I've worked on, like, I've tried to push like that stuff out there, but I mean, I was so excited when I saw the work that you guys did on Uncharted. Like, I saw the videos, and first I was jealous that I didn't have a video like that. But then I was just so excited that it was a huge undertaking. It had a whole media push. It was all over my Twitter. There was a Polygon article. There was a Game Informer article. And the fact that we're having these discussions and that there's awareness being brought was great. And like I said, I was a huge fan of Uncharted. So I was pretty pumped.
Well, Uncharted was the first game to actually use the word accessibility in an option panel.
That's true.
Even that is something I could never have imagined just a couple of years ago.
If you told me a month before you guys did that, I don't know that I would have.
And I actually wanted to make it a point in that game, because a lot of the times, if there is or if there are accessibility features in games, they're buried in 2 or 3 different menus. You know, controller customization is buried under gameplay, difficulty might be on the main menu, and subtitles might be buried in the audio, but that's just a guess. So I really tried to push to make sure that that was standardized. The other thing that's really great is I would argue that this panel is the greatest advancement in video game accessibility ever since the movement started. Because as Tara was saying, you know, 6 years ago, you couldn't beg a developer to make their game accessible. I mean, you could get on your hands and knees and they just wouldn't do it. But now we're sitting here having this discussion at the behest of one of the biggest names in gaming. And this is going to drive the industry forward because they see that Sony's taking it seriously, and hopefully other developers will as well.
Yeah, I think even just going back 2 years ago, I mean, it was only in 2014 that if a game included a single accessibility feature, that would be front page news.
Yeah, we celebrated that. I mean, oh my gosh, there's colorblind mode. These people are amazing.
Whereas now, if you launch a game and it's not colorblind friendly, like, you're making front page news, but it's the other reason. They're like, how could you not do this? So it's nice to see, like, as we're progressing forward, this basic accessibility stuff, like, players are expecting it. And it's really nice to see that people are they're looking for it now, and people realize that sometimes it's a mistake when you leave them out.
Yeah, I think there's something nice in particular we've seen in the last year. I mean, talking about the accessibility menu, actually seeing games that do now have a broad swathe of features. I think it's fair to say in the past year particularly.
Yeah, I think in the last couple of years, I mean, I'm not surprised when I see an accessibility feature in a game anymore. Well, 2 years ago, you know, minus the colorblind stuff, anyone that had some kind of like specific accessibility feature, I would kind of celebrate. Now I'm with you. Like, why don't you have that? Everyone else does.
That's kind of the take that a lot of developers have as well. Like when we are working on these things, the thing that comes up a lot from from teammates is, why didn't we have this already? Or like, why haven't we been talking about these types of things before? And so the stance from devs has, in my experience so far, been very like, yeah, of course, like we should have this. This is a given. So I think that the community at large and developers are taking that stance as well.
Well, I talked to a developer one time, and he told me something that was really profound to me. He was adding some accessibility features into his game, and I said, well, why are you putting this much effort into it? Because it's just curious to me as to why. And he goes, well, I spent a lot of money telling an amazing story with some great gameplay, and I want every person who possibly can to enjoy this hard work that I put into it. And I'm like, that's the right attitude. I am a storyteller, and I want people to enjoy my story.
Yeah, I think everyone wants to see other people enjoying their hard work.
I mean, well, even last night at dinner we went out, you were talking about how when you hear a fan of a game that you worked on, you're like so excited to hear.
Yeah, there's nothing more fulfilling as a game developer than someone coming up and telling you they love your product, but there's even something more profound when because I was talking about my feel-good file. I have a file where basically anytime I fight for an accessibility feature and it goes live, if I get positive feedback, I put it in this file so that it kind of fuels me to keep fighting for stuff. So even if maybe I don't win this battle, I can go back, I can look at this file, and so be like, wow, I didn't think I could play this game, but it had remappable controls, so I did, and I loved it. Like, it's like I helped this person play this game that I worked on, and they got to see what I worked on, and they loved it, and like it just fuels me to keep doing more.
Right.
I think that mindset as well is something that's specific to game development. So I mean, compared to work across a few different industries, and there seems to be a lot more people working in the games industry who are kind of in it for the right reasons. Right, you know, if people were in it for the megabucks, they'd be working in a bank or something. There's so many people by comparison who work in the games industry who are doing it because they passionately believe in their vision and want that to be experienced by as many as people as possible. So,
well, they're artists
a natural
as well,
fit.
and I think we love when people love our art.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the opposite of that is when somebody reaches out and says that they couldn't do something because of some design flaw or a choice that we made. And that was what happened with Josh, when Josh reached out and said that he couldn't finish Uncharted 2 on his own because of a button mash sequence. That was devastating to anybody I told that to on the team. I wasn't on Uncharted 2, but when I talked to Bruce about it and Neil, they were like, dang, like that sucks that somebody didn't get to experience the end of our game because of something like that. So that goes both ways. When somebody reaches out with positive, it's like awesome. And when somebody reaches out with good feedback like that, it puts in you this like, I want to solve that problem. I want to figure out how to fix that for next time.
Well, the reality is every person in this room is going to lose their physical ability as they age, and nobody wants to stop gaming as they get older. So even if you don't benefit from accessibility today, you're going to benefit at some point, even if it's just for the 3 weeks because you busted your arm doing something stupid. Everybody will benefit from.
Well, to that point, one of the things we did as an organization a couple of years ago, because we were really having a hard time getting developers to understand, is we wrote this really strong white paper on how would your grandma play your game. Because we kind of equated their grandmother and the loss of things that happen as we age as, well, what kind of features would you include in your game to make sure she could continue to enjoy it? And a lot of developers kind of said, oh my gosh, you kind of created a straw man for me that I understand because I love my grandma.
Yeah.
And I would love my grandma to play my games.
Well, if we are going to get people's grandmas playing the games, I mean, we're progressing, right? We're in a better point than we have been before, but there's still a way to go. So, Josh, you want to start this one? What kind of stuff do you think needs to be done in the future?
Well, my big angle is education. I always think we need more education. Whenever I ask a developer why aren't more games made accessible, they say it's because we just don't know how to. So I hope to one day work myself out of a job. I hope that one day every studio has a person whose job it is to examine to examine the accessibility of the product from concept all the way to release. And then the other side of this, and you'll hear the counterpoint to it from Mark, but I do believe that at some point in the future, we can start including some level of accessibility information on the back of the box. Even if it's just a seal of approval that means that it meets a certain reasonable standard for the disabled community because it has the 10 or 5 most needed features. I think that then we can have a really informed populace, and then the populace can vote with their wallets and not purchase games that are not accessible.
And I'm going to slightly disagree. I agree that we should have accessibility in games, or I wouldn't be on this panel. What I don't believe that you can do is put it on the back of the box, because everything is accessible to somebody. And so having like a rating system, who's the person that's going to be the one that we rate that on? Because I know 10 people with muscular dystrophy, and all 10 of them are looking for different accessibility features. So what I'm really hoping that we do is we create these options and these guidelines, which you guys are doing already, that allow everyone to kind of tailor the experience to their needs, because you don't really necessarily know. So I don't think it can be boiled down to like a seal of approval, because I can show you a game that is incredibly accessible, and I can introduce you to somebody who can't play it. And so that's where I'm really just concerned with the back of the box. What I would really like to see is a fact sheet that comes out on every game, and maybe a unified website that has like a fact sheet or a checklist, because I just don't think it's a single number. I agree with your vision. I just don't think it's a symbol. What I think it is because accessibility is hard, it has to be just a little bit more than just a button.
Well, I think we can break it down. I think we've seen precedents for something kind of in between from other industries, right? So like if you pick up a DVD or a Blu-ray, it'll tell you in the back where it's got subtitles.
But I'm just looking at real estate on a box. So I'm wondering if,
I think
on the
that
box, sure.
there's I think there's space in some of even like the platform distribution level. Like if you go on Steam right now, you can search for just games that have closed captions. Well, what if you already need remappable controls? Maybe that we just put those as things you can filter on. Maybe you go to your digital download store and you know that you need to have a game that's...
Well, Steam has more than just that. They've actually started doing that. So depending on, you can check different features that they have in accessibility.
It's interesting that you use the word fact sheet, because if you go online and you look at the ESRB rating for each game has its own fact sheet. And what the ESRB and other rating systems are fundamentally arbitrary and subjective, but it does give consumers a tool that they can look, they can understand why it has the rating or the seal that it has, and it directs them to the right place to get more information that they need, so that then they can vote, so that then they can purchase the game or not purchase the game based on what they feel is appropriate. It's the same reason that 2 movies can both be R-rated for vastly different reasons, and I can feel comfortable taking an underage person into one and not into another one, because it's what's appropriate for the consumer.
So about on a different topic, any other things you think might be useful for the industry to move towards in the future?
Sorry, did you talk to me?
Yep, sure. Tara, Alex?
Sorry, my headphone, this is not working, so I can't actually hear you without leaning forward. Can you repeat?
So ratings aside, any other things you think might be useful for the industry to move towards in the future?
from the developer perspective.
Just in general, anything you think might help to move accessibility further forward than it is today?
I think the biggest thing right now that's missing for most dev teams as far as like implementing on this stuff and actually putting it into their games is understanding how much time it takes when in the pipeline they need to start doing it, which is very, very early on. And just sort of having access to the type of information that your organization and that Josh has put out there already for developers. Timing is the biggest one. Like,
Yes.
you know,
Yes,
you have
yes.
this, there's this thing, you hear something and you're like, oh yeah, we can do that. That's a thing we can do. There's a very big difference between acknowledging that it's a thing you can do and actively doing it, actively taking the time. Dev cycles, 3 to 4 years, some games longer than that. And so much happens in that time. You know, problems arise, schedule conflicts. You're a producer, you know all about the scheduling conflicts that can happen. And those things can very easily be forgotten. They can very easily be pushed. And it's not an issue of people not caring. It's just an issue of we have these kind of structured setups for creating games that have, you know, been put into place over years. And so for us, a big part of it, I don't think I could have done it on my own. I had Amelia Schatz also championing it. So that was a designer and UI. Amelia managed to get programmers on board, like Sandeep Shakar, I believe, was the programmer who helped her implement early on, and she was just doing it. She was just implementing things, which I know is not possible in all development companies, but getting people on board, understanding that it has to start happening early. It's a conversation that can't happen once. You need to, like anything, like UI, like any other part of games, it has to be checked up on. It has to have deadlines and, you know, meet those marks at every point. And I think that's a big part of it is people just talk about it.
But I think to Josh's point, having someone within the organization that's an accessibility specialist, even if it's at a studio level or a multi-studio level, would be one of their jobs, is to kind of make sure that these features don't get lost in the backlog, so to speak.
Well, I don't know that someone outside of the studio level isn't going to have enough vision to the day-to-day process.
I mean,
to
like
be
if there's a
able to-
multiple studio, like if like Sony could have one person that has that ability.
Even then, like, you're going to have, like, if you could get it, I would recommend, like, finding a lead or a producer or a manager who's going to be in that studio championing the features. And, like, what she was saying, like, you have to do it from the beginning. The number one lesson I've been teaching developers is game accessibility is easy when you start it day one.
It's expensive 2 weeks before release.
Retrofitting it can nearly be impossible. There have been titles I worked on where, you know, we finally convinced the right people, yep, we should do this. Wow, we're starting this late. And then dug into the code and looked at the systems and we're like, dear God, this is a rat's nest. We would have to rewrite all of this to be able to get this accessibility feature in. But if we had known about that constraint ahead of time, it would have been very easy. It's the same way, like, if you know you're not going to code something this way because it'll cause problems for another system, you just don't code it that way. You code it a different way. But we basically engineered ourselves into a hole where we couldn't put the accessibility features in because it was too late. But if you know from day one, it's in your schedule from day one, if you have a manager, a lead, a producer, a program manager, a product manager, like, making sure it's on the schedule, it doesn't blow your scope, and it makes for a better product. Because I think one of the things that everyone has always seen is when you put these features in, your core player base is going to use them and like them too. Like, everyone thinks that a lot of this stuff is like niche, and that's not true. A lot of other gamers are going to use this.
So to question to you though, I mean, what about the tools? Because I know you've been working a lot with trying to kind of build some accessibility features into like the game making tools.
Yeah, the engines. I think that's a really good point. The middleware, the tools that people use to develop games with, that's a real area of opportunity. Because traditionally it's kind of been a bit of a blocker, but they can do so much. And it's nice because we are actually starting to see those tools, the people are thinking about accessibility now. So Unreal Engine has now got a built-in colorblind simulator that developers can use for testing the games. Unity are currently working on engine-level button remapping. So, you know, for people who can't physically reach some of the controls, you can reconfigure them to suit your own specific needs. Obviously useful for all gamers who just don't like the designer's choice of control scheme, right? that kind of thing will be handled at an engine level, so developers don't have to worry about coding it. So that kind of stuff we're starting to see. I mean, these are only small steps, but they are steps in the right direction. They haven't been taken before, so I think that's nice potential. I mean, what I'd really, really like to see above everything else is for blind gamers. So if yes.
Hey.
So that's a big barrier. There's a lot of developers who really, really want to do stuff for blind accessibility, but the tools they're using don't actually allow them to. They don't expose the interface in a way that the software that blind people use to access a computer can understand. So how it normally works is that the software would pick up the text of the interface and speak it out. So from the developer's point of view, just label things correctly and it just works. That isn't currently possible unless you develop a game natively. So I'd really, really love to see some progress.
Well, there's a great Kickstarter from a little set of, I think they were all friends in school, that are starting a platform for building.
In New Zealand, right?
Yeah, from New Zealand. They're building a platform for building games that are completely blind friendly. And I think I know that we made sure as an organization that they were going to be funded. So when they were close, we pushed them way over the edge. And then they're now taking that and pushing that to make more and more games. So I think they're going to come out with 3 or 4 titles from the very beginning. But what they're doing is they're wanting to make it easy so that other people can make titles for that.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the things that's really great is the indie developers and these platforms like the mobile phones and the iPads and those types of things have allowed some really creative things to be made, but the cost of entry is so low compared to a big AAA title that they can kind of focus. And then I think the other advantage for people with disabilities in the gaming space is they're all competing for eyeballs. I mean, there's so much content being made every day that a lot of small studios have used accessibility as a differentiator in the market, which is pushed us even further than I think we'll ever really truly know.
Yeah, I think we see that a lot with blind gamers in particular, that because it's such an underserved market, there's such a narrow number of games available, that when a game does come out that is really good and blind players can play, they jump on it.
Yeah.
And you see that in the data, the usage data, and the money they make out of it as well.
I think that one of the other things, sort of to that point, that will help developers, even AAA developers, some of the stuff that Josh has set up at his booth, like the thing that simulates glaucoma, I believe it is, which of course is not full blindness, so it's a little bit different, but just having access to that as a developer, just having those simulations is incredible. Some of my coworkers were here and we were all trying them on. You actually gave an app to a bunch of us at a table, and some of my coworkers with me there, the technical art directors were there, and instantly they're coming up with solutions. They're like, oh, I can think of it. Oh, I know a thing that we can do for this. Or with putting on that simulator for glaucoma, it's I can think of 10 things that we could try. But it's just a matter of having access to that,
Yep.
the developers to actually have a way to simulate it like that would provide a crazy amount of insight and those problem-solving abilities that we all have that we got hired for in the first place, they just start kicking in and you just want to try to solve the problem. So I think with all of those issues, that is a huge, huge thing that will help further all of this for
So
developers.
just for context, this app is a colorblindness simulator. There's loads of them just on smartphones. Just type in colorblindness simulator, and it'll just basically let you see through colorblind eyes. And you see it when it's always the same thing when you show it to a developer. You just see the light bulb ping on above their head.
Yeah.
Oh, in
Yeah.
my gaming, if I just added this symbol,
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if there's a way to get, for any of them, to have those sorts of tools available to devs in mobile, casual, AAA, all of it, either in the studio or have somebody go around to the studios to sort of provide that service. It instantly makes you start thinking of ways to solve it. Because without having that experience, without living those experiences, it's very difficult to try to come up with a solution to a problem that you don't fully understand.
And I think kind of piggybacking off of that, a lot of times I've always told people, I don't think devs purposely set out to make inaccessible games. Most of the time that a game comes out and it's inaccessible, it's that they didn't know better. I get told all the time, oh, I wouldn't have known about that unless you had told me, or, oh, I'm aware of that, but it's because I either know someone or it directly affects me. But a lot of times they just don't understand the problem, but they are problem solvers. Game devs are problem solvers, and so once they see the problem, they can work on trying to fix it, but they don't know the problem, they don't understand the problem. So
Well, to add to that, I have a really interesting story. There was a big game, and we were talking to the lead developer, and we had mentioned to them that, you have this really big colorblind issue. And this lead developer of this major game goes, yeah, I know, I'm colorblind, and I actually can't play this game very well. And I said, well, why don't you fix it? And he goes, it never dawned on me that anyone would want me to. And I was just kind of like, wait, what? And he's like, yeah, I mean, I thought it was just me. And I'm like, no. And I gave him the statistics, and he's like, we should probably do something about this.
Right?
I mean, he was in the room every day looking at the art, and he never really said something. But at the same time, I actually have a story of another developer who is colorblind who didn't say anything to his team, and he was rejecting art piece after art piece, going, I don't like this, I don't enter it. And about the 5th iteration, one of his developers said, are you colorblind? And he goes, yes, I am. Thank you.
You get it now.
Yeah,
We can move forward.
And then the next piece of concept art, he was like, love it. Let's go with it. We're rocking.
So, well, and it's really interesting once people start learning. So I worked on Evolve, and when it launched, it had some pretty serious colorblind issues. And we ended up implementing a colorblind mode. And basically, we found out because of how we structured it, there were in-game effects that were like red and then over green grass, and so you just couldn't see them. And so we had to go and like redo these effects. We ended up creating 4 versions of each effect that would load in based on what you said. It was a weird, obviously retrofit system. But going forward, our visual effects designer, Lindsay, who was awesome, she was super aware of it. And if she saw it in concept art, and she knew that if that got
That was
put in
gonna be a
games,
problem.
like it didn't go past that. Like she'd send it back, and we didn't have to make 4 versions of everything again because she knew it. She knew what we were looking for. Just didn't let it go far enough for it to become a problem anymore.
Well, I think as well the point that you're mentioning about the person who didn't want to speak up. I mean, I've heard similar stuff for myself as well, and it seems like that's changing. So in particular, there was a dev developer I know who exactly that. He didn't want to rock the boat. He didn't want to be the one person in the room that's saying, make changes for me. But he said now, actually, as things have been advancing, as there's more public dialogue about accessibility, he now feels comfortable having these conversations.
As soon as it starts getting talked about at all in a development environment as well, everybody starts to get on board kind of on their own, and people will, it just sort of happens naturally. Like as this dialogue has, been going on internally, everyone's on, like there's nobody that isn't down to do it, and more programmers come and they just are actively thinking about it on their own now. So it really doesn't take, at first maybe not everyone's going to be on board, but that shouldn't be discouraging to a development team. Like if they can just get a few people that are like with them to start implementing, start trying things out, and slowly, well, not that slowly, it kind of happened pretty quickly, but like everybody kind of just gets on board and is willing and just is thinking about it on their own.
And that's where you want, right?
One of
But
my
we're just about out of time, so you have to go to the last topic. If you were to start this one off, Mark. So basically, we've heard a lot about things that are being done at kind of developer level, at platform level stuff. But a lot of people watching, both here and online, are gamers. So what can gamers do if they want to help move things forward?
So, we are gamers first. We're gamers with disabilities. And I've always tried to tell developers, because we always hear people say, well, if I make a game that have a lot of accessibility features, like it won't be fun or it won't be hard. And we always say that that's not true. I would rather a game be made that pushes the industry and pushes the technology that I can't play than not see that game made at all.
Amen.
So sure, you made the most amazing game in the world that I can't play, but I know that what you did, that foundation will be built on to make the next game that I can play. And I think that's a really important thing that all gamers with disabilities understand.
No gamer wants to play a bad game that happens to be perfectly accessible.
Correct. And so I think that if I were a gamer out there, and if this really resonates with you, and if you're not a person of disabilities, still advocate for accessibility. Understand that people with disabilities aren't trying to take your game away. They're not trying to make it an easy game. We're just looking for options so that we can tailor the game to play the way that we need it to be. It might not be your way, and that's okay. We just want options. And I think that the other thing is, look, Twitch is a huge thing. So people also enjoy watching games. So I know a lot of people with disabilities who can't play a game, but they really want that title to be a thing. So what they do is they actually are experts in it by watching other people play it for them. And I think so we are gamers first, and we really love this part of our lives.
So, Alex, from a developer's perspective, what would you like to see from gamers?
From gamers?
No
or
problem. Yeah, so what can that's from a developer's perspective, what can gamers do to help move accessibility forward? So we were talking the other night a little bit about the difference it makes getting stories in and what kind of routes people have to get in touch, that kind of thing.
Oh, yes. So we've talked about this a few times, but like getting feedback from people, I know sometimes you like feel when you're tweeting or messaging a company that it's just sort of like going out into the void and like nobody is responding to you, but we do see it. Like everybody, when you tweet those things or when you email, somebody is seeing it. Oftentimes they can't respond, NDAs, a lot of reasons, but so I think that's a really important thing. If you tweet at the developers about the games you care about, to tell them like, this is something that I care about. We do see it when it does affect you positively or negatively. Email the developer directly. We've gotten emails from people, positive stuff that's been very uplifting, that's made us think like, wow, that's cool. I want to do more of this. And then like when Josh emailed me with kind of these feedback, this criticism, we took that very personally. Obviously, that was like the basis for a lot of what we did. So that's the main thing that I think they can do when interacting with developers. And even if you're not a person that has disabilities, if this is something that you feel strongly about that you'd like to see included, add your voice to that. It's not gonna, you're only helping people by contributing your voice, and you're making the community better as a whole. So
I think that's been a really beautiful thing to see over the years. I mean, certainly, looking back to 6-7 years ago, if someone was talking about an accessibility issue on the forum for a game, there'd be a lot of vitriol. It's been nice to see the complete turnaround. Now people post about that kind of stuff. It's messages of support.
As your grandma say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
The other thing gamers need to keep in mind is that it's not a one-sided street. There is a certain amount of responsibility that they have to make sure that the game is accessible for their needs. If you need a game with a complicated input device like a head switch, it's your responsibility to set that up, because the developer can't make games that are accessible for head switch. What they can do is they can make games that don't hinder you when you use that device. And so the gamers, what they need to do is educate themselves.
Yep. And that's it. We're about out of time. So there's just one thing left, which is if you want to carry on the conversation, all of us like to talk about this kind of stuff, so there's our details. Get in touch. So with that, that's it. So thank you to our panelists, Mark, Tara, Josh, and Alex, and also thank you to PlayStation.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.